Hi everyone, my name is Márton GOSZTONYI and it's a pleasure to be here. And in my lecture, I would like to speak about startup identity, especially the identity of classification or the classification of startup identity in semi-peripheral countries, especially in Hungary. Um, First of all, I would like to speak about why it is important. Identity is pretty much important because how the firm actually identify itself, it's basically determines the event horizon of the economical transaction of it, or basically how it works. So if we understand how the identity change, we might understand how the firm are actually function. Um, I would like to speak about a little bit about the concept of startups. Um, it's a very wide range how different scholars are actually defined what startups are. It's if we go back to the 60s, the main idea behind the startup was that it's a fast growing firm, or basically which are working in a fast growing electronical context, which can be characterized with a very rapid growth. After that, in the 70s or in the 80s, a financial aspect of the definition came into the use of the startup concept, basically the venture capital and how the venture capital reform this kind of industry. After that, during the 2000, the hard work and the informal connection came into the definition, and after that the love of the work or the hard work, after that the passion, how the startuppers are actually implement and create their firms, and after that basically come a new idea like it's a lifestyle or an economical status symbol of a given country. Uh, our research basically based on startup life cycle theories, especially Peskin's model, which is a venture capital model, and based on the different stage of the venture capital, what the given startup gets, Peskin creates a life cycle model. We use this kind of venture capital model to modeling or analyzing the Hungarian startups, and we used 12 documents to do that because we did a text-based analysis or national language or language processing analysis, text analysis. And this 12 document came from 24 interviews, and we combined or aggregated these interviews into 12 documents. And these interviews was conducted by researchers in two waves. The first wave was in 2020, the second wave was in 2021. So the data is absolutely up to date. What we use in the data analysis is text mining and AI. Basically, the AI and the text mining methodology came very handy after the big data revolution, and there are several different methodology how you can do this. What we use is three different methods. The first one is TF, so term frequency, and TF-IDF, term frequency, inverse document frequency, which are actually good for determining analyzing the terms and lemmas what are actually appear in the text. The second methodology what we use, this is the N-gram methodology, which actually identified how the narratives pair are created within the documents. So basically it analyzes how one lemma connected to the other lemma and how these connections are actually formed a network. And the third one is a topic modeling, which is an AI, artificial intelligence methodology. We use the Jaccard index and the cosine distance, whether we can do this topic modeling. And after that, when we find that we can, we use the LDA algorithm to actually define this kind of topic modeling. We use R and R Studio to conduct our research. So the Paschen model, what we use, the Paschen lifecycle model for startups, what we used is have 4 different categories. Pre-seed categories, it's actually when the starts and doesn't have any financial aid or grant or something like that from the outside. The first seed part, when the given firm gets its first money injection, the Series A and Series B, which are the third and the fourth spare of the life cycle. In the table, you can see in the startup column that who are those startup what we were working with. In the year column, that when the interview was actually conducted or aggregated document, and in these columns, you can see how many startups are actually fit into one category of this Paschen model. Our research questions and hypothesis was based on this self-identification. So our main hypothesis was that self-identification in semi-peripheral countries is not constant. So it means that the identity of startups is changing along to the different categories. It means also that we have, this was our main hypothesis, but we also have some sub-hypotheses. The first sub-hypothesis was that the Paschen model of self-identification is a very good model to capture this kind of identification shift, and also can be very useful in semi-peripheral countries. The second sub-hypothesis was that beside of this Paschen model, based on artificial intelligence, we can also create or with topic modeling, we can also create self-identification categories and with artificial intelligence. And the third hypothesis was that these two identificational teams can combine and actually reinforce each other. So first of all, we started working with the Paschen model. We first analyzed the TF-IDF index of the different phase of the Paschen model. You can see in this log-log model that the different categories of the Paschen model are actually somehow different, but some are very similar. The C and Series B, which are actually indicated with line green and line violet, are actually pretty similar, although those documents who belongs to the Series A, which is indicated with the line blue, and the pre-seed, which is indicated with the line reddish, are a little bit different if we see the TF-IDF index, which means that in some peripheral countries, these categories can be used, although some of the categories are pre-intertwined. In the bigger analysis, based on this 4 Paschen creations, we indicated which kind of lemmas are actually connected to the other lemmas, and we created 4 different networks. We can see these 4 different networks in here. You can see that the most dense networks are the Series A and the seed networks, and also the less distant, dense networks is basically the pre-seed network of that, which means that these kind of characteristics can be used. So the Paschen characteristics can be used in a semi-peripheral countries and describe a different kind of identificational aspect of fur. The second part was to analyze how topic modeling or AI can capture this kind of sphere. We did the Jacquard index, which is the first figure, and the cosine distance, which is the second one, to analyze, or this was the pre-statistics, let's call it pre-statistics of this thing, whether we can analyze in a topic modeling. In a Jacquard similarity, we can see that there is a slight chance that an AI can provide very good categories about this corpus, although the cosine distance or the result of the cosine distance shows us that it might not be good enough to do a topic modeling. Either way, we started it, and we could define a topic modeling. What we used is a k-mean topic modeling, which are actually part of the LDA. We created 3 different clusters. You can see the change of some squares in clusters. We decided that 3 clusters gonna be enough, because although, as you can see from the figure, you can still create more and more, and the change of sum of square, it's still decreasing, but with these 3 dimensional clusters, we can capture a very good and very interpretative clusters. The first cluster basically capture these kind of lemmas, which are actually refer to a very classical entrepreneurial approach. So in this category, or identity category, the startup doesn't have this kind of startup identity. There are more would like to create an enterprise, which are actually a company which is very good, which is a very good place to work at, and which is identify a problem and give an answer for that. And it's operated as a company. So it's absolutely a classical entrepreneurial approach. That's why we called it this way. The second cluster, what the AI created, is we called it money-making idea. So it's still not a startup, but rather an identity where the founders would like to do some kind of an idea-based entity, which are actually creates money within a very, very, very short period of time. The third cluster is actually the classical startup definition or identity, when the founders would like to create a startups, which is a fast growing company, and all the different aspects of a startup can be found in here. So basically, we have 3 different categories and 3 different identities, how the startup define themselves. And the next thing, we would like to combine these 2 kind of aspect. So we would like to see that how this kind of venture capital life cycle based theory of Paschen can combine with this AI based 3 dimensions. And you can see that in the pre-seed part, the most important aspect of a startup is not a classical startup idea or a fast growing thing, rather the first cluster. So rather the classical enterprise approach or identity, this is what's actually dominated the pre-seed part, or a pre-seed identity. The seed identity is the second one, and we can see that the classical approach is decreasing, although the classical startup ideas is growing. So it means that there is a shift in the identity, and this kind of place, the founders are getting familiar with the startup ideas, and starting reform their firm, and also the identity of it. The first series, when they get the first venture capital, the fast growing or money making firm idea or identity come into the mind, and after the Series B, or at the Series B part, the classical identity and also the fast money-making identities are decreasing, and the classical startup identity are growing. So what it is basically means that the startup identity is not a constant concept, rather a shifting and changing concept, which is come from a classical entrepreneurial view to the classical startup view with these kind of through these kind of stages. We also generated narrative space of it, and I'm sorry, this is in Hungarian, but it's very hard to do it otherwise. Basically, we generated a lemma-based narrative space, which is actually covers or created the same results what we get in the previous thing. This is also based on AI modeling. Which means, in summary, that all our hypothesis was accepted. So the identity is changing in a semi-peripheral countries. Although the venture capital lifecycle based theory is very useful in a way to analyze how identity looks like in a semi-peripheral countries, but in a topic modeling or an AI based, we also could create a new kind of identity classifications, which are also very useful. And these two kinds of theories or classification can combine together and create an overall prospect. So the results shows that if we would like to work with startups, it takes time till a founder creates a very classical startup identities. Basically, we can, in a semi-peripheral countries, we can only speak about startup identity in the Series B part. Before of that, there is a very fluid identifiable change. So if you would like to work with startups or would like to get some kind of economical decisions, what a startup usually do in a semi-peripheral country, we cannot do it from the pre-seed or seed or Series A part. We can only do it from after or at the Series B part. Before of that, the identification shows that the firm's gonna work quite differently. In the pre-seed part, it's much more like a project, or really would like where the people would like to go out from the from their or start something new, which is more like a classical enterprise. In the series, in the seed concept. There are some aspect of the startup identity, but it's rather in a shifting dialogue. In a series A is when the money-making idea or fast money-making ideas come into the identity and change this kind of identity into that. And the series B is when the investments or series B investment part is when the classical startup idea gets. So it means that the identities of the startups in a semi-peripheral countries are actually changing throughout their life cycle and not a constant thing. And it's very important that it's much so it's not as fast as, for example, in the US or in Israel. So for example, in the Silicon Valley or in Tel Aviv, where the identities or the founders would like to create a startup from the very first time when they meet. It looks like that in Hungary, it rather looks like a process till the founders and those who created these enterprises reach that port that's actually functioning as a startup. So you can see the literature, which is actually based on that. And thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions or any remarks, I would be very pleased to get an email from you. And here is my email address. Thank you very much for listening to me and have a very lovely day. Bye-bye.